Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
You know that sound a refrigerator makes? Like that low, constant hum in the background of the kitchen.
Oh, yeah, the one you don't even realize is there until it stops.
Exactly. Like when you first move into a new place, it drives you absolutely crazy. But after a few weeks, your brain just, completely deletes it. You only notice it again when the power goes out, and suddenly there's this deafening, relieving silence.
It's a huge relief, yeah.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Because today, we're looking at something that almost everyone listening to this right now deals with. But we've all decided to just tune it out, exactly like that humming fridge.
Right. We just ignore it.
I'm talking about that background physical discomfort.
Yeah.
The stiff back when you roll out of bed, that literal block of concrete sitting in your neck by 5 p.m.
Yeah, and people tend to label that background hum as, well, quote unquote, normal.
Right. Just part of life.
Exactly. We tell ourselves, we're just getting older, or that sitting at a desk all day just comes with this inevitable physical penalty. But the sources we're unpacking today, they challenge that acceptance completely.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. This background discomfort, it's an invisible epidemic. It's quietly draining your daily energy, it restricts your behavior, and it alters the entire trajectory of your health over decades.
So to figure out how to basically pull the plug on that humming refrigerator, we're drawing from the work of Alexandra Cash. She's a behavior change specialist and a certified personal trainer. And we're focusing on the insights from her book, Longevity Through Physical Activity, The 15-Minute Habit.
Which is a fantastic resource, by the way.
It really is. And the core argument here is this radical shift in how we view movement. I mean, it's moving away from the idea of physical activity as just a hobby, like trying to get a six-pack or running a weekend 5K.
Right, the fitness industry stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And reframing it as an essential operating system for human longevity and adaptability.
And the scale of what happens when that operating system breaks down is, it's massive. We're looking at chronic musculoskeletal pain, or CMP.
CMP.
Yeah. In the United States alone, this affects nearly 100 million adults.
Wow. 100 million.
Just in the U.S., globally, 20% of the entire human population is walking through life carrying this physical burden that completely alters their day-to-day existence.
1 in 5 people. That's wild.
It is. Half of all sick leave absences are tied directly to this. But, the most alarming piece of data Cash presents isn't even the economic loss. It's the primary medical response. 249 million opioid prescriptions have been issued to cope with this pain.
Okay, let's unpack this because, 249 million prescriptions.
Yes.
Realistically, though, if someone is in agonizing, debilitating pain, an opioid solves their immediate problem, right? It turns off that screaming alarm bell so they can just get through the Tuesday.
Right, it does do that.
So why shouldn't they take the pill? Are we just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound here? Like, if 20% of the world is hurting, isn't it proof that our default way of living is fundamentally broken?
Well, you nailed it with the Band-Aid analogy, because Cash emphasizes that this reliance on pills isn't a treatment plan at all. It's a massive warning sign. An opioid dampens the central nervous system's ability to receive pain signals.
So it just cuts the wire to the alarm.
Exactly. It turns down the volume dial. But it does absolutely nothing to extinguish the fire that's causing the alarm to ring in the first place.
Right. The house is still burning.
Exactly. And when you rely on a chemical to mute that signal, the underlying mechanical issues like muscle weakness, joint instability, poor movement patterns, they just continue to deteriorate in the background.
Because you don't even know they're failing.
Right. So by the time the medication wears off, the physical tissue is often in a much worse state than before. To actually put out the fire, we have to discard this traditional definition of what pain even is. We have to look far beyond just the physical tissues.
Which is so counterintuitive. Because we normally think of pain purely as this mechanical input-output system. Like I touch a hot stove, my hand hurts. I lift a heavy box with a rounded back, my spine hurts. Biology, plain and simple.
Right, the classic model.
So what is the alternative to that, if it's not just tissues?
Well, modern science actually operates on what's called the biopsychosocial model of chronic pain.
Biopsychosocial.
Exactly. It's an incredibly complex web woven from 3 different threads. Now, the bio part is undeniable. There's almost always an initial tissue issue like inflammation, a past injury, maybe some cartilage wear.
Okay, so there's a real physical spark.
Yes, there is a spark. But the biological spark alone doesn't sustain chronic debilitating pain for years on end. The psycho and social factors factors are what turn that little spark into a raging forest fire.
But how does that actually work mechanically? Like, how does my psychological state physically amplify the pain in my lower back?
It all comes down to how the brain processes danger. So, when you experience physical trauma, sensory receptors in your body called nociceptors send warning signals up to your brain.
Nociceptors, right.
But nociception is not the same thing as pain. Pain is an output that is created by the brain after it evaluates those incoming signals.
Wait, the brain decides if it should hurt.
Precisely. If you are experiencing high anxiety, or if you're catastrophizing, which basically means your brain is convinced this pain means you are permanently broken, your nervous system remains in a constant state of hypervigilance.
So you're stuck in fight or flight.
Exactly. Your brain starts pumping out stress hormones like cortisol, which actually increases systemic inflammation in your body. And the neural pathways that transmit those warning signals, they actually become more efficient. They get more sensitive. So the threshold for what triggers pain drops drastically.
Wow. So the nervous system gets so wound up that it starts interpreting completely safe, normal sensory information as a massive threat.
Yes. And the social factors lock that hypervigilance into place. Things like isolation, a lack of a support system, financial stress, all of those signal to the brain that you are vulnerable.
And when you're vulnerable, you need more protection.
Right. When the brain feels vulnerable, it keeps the pain alarm blaring as a protective mechanism. It's trying to keep you safe. Over 50% of people dealing with chronic pain also suffer from depression and anxiety. Pain basically ceases to be just a momentary sensation. It becomes the neurological environment the person lives within.
Man, it sounds like a faulty smoke detector. Like you install it to keep you safe from a house fire, but it becomes so hypersensitive over time.
That's a great way to look at it.
And eventually it starts going off every time you just like boil water for pasta.
Yeah.
And the alarm is so deafening and stressful.
Yeah.
that instead of fixing the detector, you just stop cooking altogether. You just avoid the kitchen completely.
Yes. And the physical equivalent of avoiding the kitchen is what the scientific literature calls fear avoidance behavior.
Fear avoidance.
Right. Because the brain interprets any minor twinge as catastrophic damage, the person begins to restrict their movement. They start resting more. They avoid taking the stairs. They stop bending over to tie their shoes. They stop walking to the park.
Which, I mean, the logic makes total sense in the moment. If moving hurts, not moving must be the cure, right?
It feels logical, but the paradox is that the quote-unquote cure actually accelerates the disease.
How so?
Well, when movement stops, your tissues lose their blood flow and oxygenation, which are absolutely essential for healing. Muscles atrophy and weaken. Your joints stiffen up. The actual physical capacity of the body shrinks.
So your world just gets smaller and smaller.
It does. And because the muscles are now genuinely weaker, the next time the person does have to move, say they have to pick up a dropped set of keys, those weakened tissues struggle to handle the load. So it hurts even more than it did a month ago.
Oh.
And the brain registers this new, sharper pain and goes, see, I told you moving was dangerous. And the cycle just deepens.
Okay, so if the brain's panic is the amplifier here, and this fear avoidance is literally shrinking the body's physical capacity, how do we break the loop? I mean, you can't just tell someone whose nervous system is screaming at them to go do jumping jacks.
No, definitely not.
If my back is locked up, how do we dial down that threat response?
This is where Kosh emphasizes that a multifaceted condition requires an interdisciplinary circle of care. It's not just a pill, and it's not just one specific exercise.
Right, it takes a village.
Exactly, it takes a team. Physical therapists, physicians, psychologists, and health coaches. And one of the most critical interventions isn't just physical at all. It's the combination of guided movement with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
So what does this all mean? Because when we talk about therapy for physical pain, I can definitely hear someone listening right now being a bit skeptical. Like, are you saying the pain is just all in my head? If someone has a compressed disc in their spine, how does sitting on a couch talking to a therapist decompress the disc?
It's a completely fair question. We have to make it very clear. The pain is entirely real. But we have to separate the concept of structural damage from the sensation of pain.
Okay.
CBT does not magically decompress a spinal disc. What it does is systematically dismantle those catastrophic beliefs that are keeping the nervous system in that state of hyperarousal we talked about. The primary goal of combining CBT with physical activity is to teach the patient the physiological difference between hurt and harm.
Let's define that boundary between hurt and harm, because that feels like the linchpin of this entire recovery process.
It absolutely is. Harm implies actual tissue damage. Tearing a ligament, fracturing a bone, rupturing a tendon. That's harm.
Right.
Hurt, on the other hand, is the sensation of discomfort. When a physical therapist guides a chronic pain patient through a slow, controlled stretch of a stiff hamstring, it's going to be uncomfortable. It will hurt. But the tissue is not tearing. There is no harm occurring.
I see.
Through CBT, the patient learns to consciously identify their fearful thoughts in real time. So, as they perform the stretch, instead of the brain firing a massive panic signal like, we are ripping the muscle, stop immediately, they are guided to reframe the thought.
They literally talk themselves through it.
Exactly. They say to themselves, my muscle is tight and this is uncomfortable, but I am safe. My body is resilient.
So by repeating that exposure safely, they're proving to their own nervous system that the smoke detector doesn't need to go off. They're recalibrating the alarm.
Exactly. And the brain actually physically changes. The amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, becomes less reactive. And as the fear drops, the patient begins to move more freely, which builds strength, increases blood flow, and eventually resolves the underlying mechanical weakness.
There's a positive feedback loop.
Yes. The combination of cognitive reframing and physical movement speeds up recovery much faster than either approach on its own.
Okay, so CBT and slow exposure help the brain stop panicking.
Mhm.
But the brain was panicking for a reason initially, right? There was a physical spark. What are we physically doing to our bodies every day that triggers that initial alarm bell and sets this whole biopsychosocial cascade into motion?
To understand that, we really have to look at the lower back. Back pain is the leading cause of disability worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yes. 80% of people will experience it at some point, and the vast majority of this pain is classified as mechanical or non-organic.
What exactly?
Meaning it's not a disease state like rheumatoid arthritis or bone cancer. It is the direct result of our daily postural habits and how we load the spine. And sitting is the primary culprit.
Walk us through the biomechanics of sitting. Why is a comfortable ergonomic desk chair structurally devastating to the spine over time?
Well, the human spine has a natural S-curve. The lumbar region, which is your lower back, has this natural inward curve called a lordosis. This curve allows the spine to absorb shock like a spring. But when you sit down, especially if you hunch forward toward a steering wheel or a laptop, your pelvis tucks under. That natural inward curve flattens out or even reverses into a C shape.
And when you lose that spring shape, the physics of how your body handles gravity completely changes.
Dramatically. The compressive load on the front of your inner vertebral discs, those are the little shock absorbers between your spinal bones, that pressure increases exponentially. Right. And at the exact same time, the deep core muscles that are designed to stabilize the spine, they basically turn off because the chair is doing the work of holding you up.
So you're squishing the discs while the muscles are asleep on the job.
You're continuously subjecting the spinal discs to high pressure while putting the supporting musculature to sleep. It sets the perfect stage for vulnerability.
Wow.
But Cash points out a very specific mechanical danger that triggers acute injuries, even for people who think they're moving well. It's called the rotation trap.
The rotation. Wait, are you saying the lower back is barely meant to twist at all?
This is a massive blind spot in how we understand our own anatomy. The lumbar spine is architecturally built for stability and bearing weight. The facet joints, which are the small connections between the vertebrae and the lower back, they are vertically aligned. They essentially lock out to prevent excessive twisting and to protect your spinal cord.
Okay, so how much can it actually twist?
Because of this bone structure, the entire lumbar spine only has about 5 to 10 degrees of safe rotation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. 5 to 10 degrees is almost imperceptible. That is barely the motion of checking your blind spot in a car.
It's tiny, yet we constantly demand massive rotational force from our lower backs. Think about swinging a golf club, or violently twisting to grab a heavy grocery bag from the back seat, or doing those aggressive seated twists in a generic fitness class.
It's like trying to use a flathead screwdriver on a Phillips screw. You're taking a piece of hardware, the lower back, and forcing it to perform a job it literally isn't designed for. No wonder the hardware gets stripped.
That analogy is perfect. When you force a joint to do a job it structurally cannot do, the body initiates what's called a compensation cascade.
A compensation cascade.
Right. The nervous system says, okay, we need to rotate 45 degrees, but the lower back can only give us 10. We need to borrow range of motion from somewhere else.
Uh-oh. Borrowing never ends well.
It doesn't. The body looks to the joints above and below the lumbar spine. Specifically, the thoracic spine and the mid-back, and the hips. Both of those areas are ball and socket or highly mobile joints that are actually designed for massive rotation.
But here is where the sitting comes back to haunt us, right? If you sit for 8 hours a day, your hips are incredibly tight. They're locked up.
Exactly. If the hips are glued shut from sitting and the mid-back is stiff from hunching over a keyboard all day, they cannot contribute to the twisting motion. They literally refuse to help.
So the lower back takes all the punishment.
The lower back is forced to absorb the sheer force of the entire movement. The intervertebral discs are subjected to rotational tearing forces. The surrounding muscles spasm to protect the spine, and boom, that is how you end up on the floor, unable to tie your shoes after just bending over to pick up a pencil. We force a stable joint to become mobile.
Man, I get that moving incorrectly, forcing stability joints to twist destroys the hardware. But the source material also frames movement as a language. If we stop the destructive movements, how does moving correctly actually rebuild both the physical body and the brain we talked about earlier?
Cash explains that moving intentionally across multiple planes of motion forward, backwards, side to side, and rotating safely through the hips and mid-back is the most potent tool we have for neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, so rewiring the brain.
Yes, you aren't just building muscle fibers, you are thickening the neural pathways between your brain and your limbs. And the foundation of this rebuilding process is a concept called proprioception.
Proprioception. I know this is often referred to as the brain's sixth sense or a 3D map, but how does that actually work on a biological level? Like, how does standing on one leg actually change my brain?
Well, proprioception is your body's internal sense of its position, motion, and equilibrium in space. Woven into your muscles, tendons, and joints are millions of tiny sensory receptors. They're called mechanoreceptors, muscle spindles, and Golgi tendon organs.
Sounds like a lot of hardware.
It is. And they are constantly measuring the tension, length, and load on your tissues, firing thousands of signals per second up your spinal cord to your brain. It's how you can walk down a flight of stairs in the pitch dark without looking at your feet. Your brain knows exactly where your limbs are in space.
So when we do functional movement like balance training, complex yoga flows, or martial arts, we're actively upgrading the resolution of that 3D map.
Exactly. When you challenge your body with an unstable surface or a new complex movement pattern, those sensory receptors have to work in overdrive. They flood the brain with novel data. And the brain is forced to process this information rapidly to keep you from falling over.
Right.
This requires intense focus, coordination, and rapid decision-making at a subconscious level. The research actually shows that individuals who train their proprioception have a significantly lower risk of injury simply because their nervous system reacts to unexpected slips or trips milliseconds faster than someone who doesn't train.
Wait, that brings up a fascinating connection. Is there a bridge between physical adaptability and psychological resilience?
Yeah.
Like if I'm training my nervous system to handle physical instability smoothly by doing, a complicated yoga flow, does that neural upgrade carry over into how I handle a chaotic, stressful meeting at work?
Mm-hmm.
Adapting physically trains you to adapt emotionally.
What's fascinating here is the data strongly suggests a huge carryover. Cash frames movement as our primal dialogue with gravity and unpredictability.
A primal dialogue. I love that.
When you consistently expose your nervous system to controlled physical stress, like managing the wobbling of a single leg deadlift or learning a complex coordination drill, you are teaching your brain not to panic when things feel unstable.
You're practicing calm.
You are practicing remaining calm while adapting to real-time challenges. That improved neural efficiency translates directly into higher emotional regulation. A nervous system trained to handle physical unpredictability fluidly is much, much better equipped to handle the unpredictable psychological stressors of daily life.
And it does all that without defaulting to that overwhelming fear avoidance response we discussed earlier.
Precisely.
That fundamentally changes the definition of exercise. We typically view working out as this purely transactional chore, right? Like burning off calories or growing a bicep. But it is actually an active recalibration of the body's hardware and the brain's software.
Exactly. It's active aging. It's about building a body that supports you. A body that moves with high proprioceptive awareness is a body that ages incredibly well. And pain stops being a terrifying sign that you are broken, and it becomes what it was always meant to be. A highly specific, useful signal that the system's mechanics just need a little adjustment.
So, to bring this all together for you listening, the mission today was to map out this invisible epidemic and understand how to navigate it. We have to stop normalizing that background hum of physical discomfort.
We really do.
We must acknowledge the biopsychosocial reality of pain, that our stress, our isolation, and our catastrophic thoughts are physically amplifying our suffering. But we can use cognitive reframing to turn the volume down.
Right.
And we need to respect the mechanical limits of our anatomy, protecting our lumbar spines from twisting by building real mobility in our hips and mid-back. And most crucially, we have to start viewing intentional movement as the ultimate tool to train our sixth sense of proprioception.
Forging a nervous system that is deeply resilient to both physical and emotional shock. Moving forward, consider the idea of movement as a constant, ongoing dialogue. The next time you feel a random ache or a sudden stiffness in your lower back or a gripping tension in your shoulders, resist the urge to immediately numb it and power through.
Don't just reach for the pill.
Right. Pause. Ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me right now about how I am living? How are you sitting? How are you managing stress? What are you avoiding? The signals are always there. If movement is a language, maybe it's time we finally listen to what our bodies are trying to say.
Man, and when you finally listen, that refrigerator stops humming and you can actually focus on how you want to live. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, engage with how you move, and we will catch you next time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.